Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. A particularly deep thank you goes to the sponsors of this channel, because you are the ones who are making it possible. You are the reason why this channel continues to be recorded in the first place. So thank you ever so much. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you. Today we will be talking about a few things that periodically emerge in the process of rigging the ship. And of course, the rigging of the ship is not only the easiest to see immediately in a vessel, it is eye-catching, it is eye-grabbing, it is what transports you into the past, it is what, if it is done properly, it is what makes you feel be part of it on the vessel. At least this is how I look at models. And it also, unfortunately, the negative of this is that if it is done badly, or with errors, or with inappropriate cordage, it just pokes your eyes. It really, I cannot tell you how much it annoys me. It makes me want to go up the wall. It is right up there with dragging your nails on an old-fashioned chalk blackboard. And considering the average age of the people who play with ship models and mine, I think that you know exactly what I mean. If I was talking to my students, they'll stare at me and wouldn't understand what I'm talking about with a blackboard. They haven't seen one or heard of it, probably. Having established just how ancient I am, let us move to the actual topic. I have never understood why people absolutely love and use secondary, less than reliable sources on rigging. The list goes on and on. I don't want to spoil the sales of anyone, so I'm not going to quote the specific titles. But I think we all know which books are the ones that are most often used and which actually not rarely have errors in them, when they are perfectly easily and cheaply accessible primary sources. One of the foremost, of course, of these is the Young Sea Officer Sheet Anchor by Darcy Lever. It is available in numerous publications since it originally came out in the early years of the 19th century. The second edition, which is usually the one copied, came immediately after the Napoleonic Wars. If memory, only too fallible memory serves me right, it came out in 1819. But in reality, they are the original edition, I think, is coming from around 1810-ish, give or take. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it is original primary source. It is right up there with David Steele, and in some ways it is more readable and more easily, it is easier to follow the instructions. So a couple of things that we will talk about today is something that I see often, and I find it really distracting from the models. That is belaying the lanyards on dead eyes. I will discuss this in just a moment. But first of all, let us discuss the standing rigging in the hull, specifically the cables that are done. And yes, of course, this is coming in context with the fact that these are the sources that the sister channel is using while rigging the Boreas. And first of all, types of line used. We all know that there are no ropes, or almost no ropes. The top rope is one of the few ropes that are available on ship. On ship, everything is lines, etc., etc. I will not repeat this. It is way too well known. Everybody says it. Every secondary source, so you do not need me to be discussing it again. For all practical purposes, there are three types of major heavy lines or cables, or call it whatever you want. The first one is the hawser laid coat. Then there is the shroud laid, and finally there is the cable laid. Darcy Lever explains all three of them. And for those of us who are enthusiasts of Patrick O'Brian, we can't but remember the bitter disappointment of Jack's when he had asked Stephen Maturin right before Sophia boarded his frigate to go and order him in town pewter plates with hawser or with cable on its borders. I forget which of the two was. And of course, it is one of the usual Patrick O'Brian puns on the fact that a cable is actually hawser late, etc. So, returning to the details, let us try to follow through on what Lever is really talking about and what these ropes actually looked like. Starting with the hawser lade, which is, after all, the simplest. It is made of 3 strands, each of which has exactly the same number of yarns that are equal. It is also right-hand laid. And I have seen numerous descriptions of how can you recognize right-hand laid versus left-hand laid or cable laid. It boils. People see the letter N, the letter Z, depending on the angle from which you're looking at them. These are the usual explanations that I see in more modern treatises. Because I'm an old guy, and I probably sailed with Prince Rupert in the 17th century, I go with primary sources, with more my near contemporaries. So look at figure 1, which is the hawser laid cable. If you look at it from this direction and the way it is, you would think that it is actually counterclock against the sun laid. But what Lever is really meaning by with the sun is that you have to look at it from the end of the line. And from the end of the line, if you flip it and on to your eyes, you will see that indeed the twist is with the sun. In other words, counterclockwise. That, to me, is the simplest and the easiest way to recognize which way is the twist of the rope. Then there is the shroud laid cable. And you would be excused thinking that shrouds are made from it. The shroud laid is also right twisted, but the difference is that it is built up of 4 strands. What are the advantages? The main one is that the twist of the rope is tighter, and therefore less water can go into it. Of course, once the shrouds are made, they are regularly tarred, etc., which will add to the water resistance of the shroud. Finally, the third example is the cable laid. And this is the more interesting in our argument, because the cable laid essentially is consisting of 3 hawsers that are twisted together against the sun. But if you look carefully, each one of the 3 parts of the cable are essentially a hawser. And each one of them is made out of 3 strands. So when you twist the whole thing, you have 9 strands. This would have aided with stretch, this would have aided with waterproofness, and of course with size and strength. So having discussed these details, let us see whether I am capable of finding my place in a book to show you the next one. Lo and behold, for once in my life, I did it without too much embarrassment. 2 things that we need to address is that rules for merchant vessels and for Royal Navy ships actually did differ. For those building American vessels from the American Revolutionary War and onwards, I would follow, as long as they're naval vessels, I would follow the British practice because that is where our traditions of shipbuilding emerged. We are related to the British system, including Constitution type of frigates. They are actually described in a British treatise of immediately after the American Revolutionary War, around 1788. Returning to the shrouds, in the Navy, they said they are cable laid. But for small ships in the merchant service, their shrouds are hawser laid. So one should be aware of this when one is rigging a model, because it does make a difference. And if you're careful, if the quality of the work is good, if you are looking at it from close up, you will notice the difference. And if you want this to be a valuable model rather than a toy, there is nothing wrong with building toys. That'll be me. That's what I am building. But I will be putting right lines, because the sister channel and the director of these videos is going to hang me without mercy if I put the wrong cable just because I'm playing with it. It's a good thing, and it is still surprising to me that she hasn't yet checked to see the rigging that I build on my miniature wargaming ships. Right, if I do not show up for the next video, ladies and gentlemen, you will know that she has checked them. Returning to the shrouds. The next thing that quite often, surprisingly often, is done wrong on the average model. I'm not speaking, of course, of the master modelers in the field. This is more for the beginners to early intermediate modelers, is the orientation of the tail end of the shroud when you're rigging a deadeye. And luckily for us, we don't have to guess. David Steele is telling us. And David Steele's book is easily available on Amazon. I'm sure that there is a link somewhere down under the video. And it is cheap. The Dover edition of the book is really cheap. It's about $20, give or take a few. So if you have invested all the money into buying the materials, into buying the kit or the scratch build, might as well spend another $20 and get a proper instruction on how to do it. So, returning to the description, Steele is very clear about it. He says at the end of the shroud you have deadeye turned in. Yeah, no kidding. It is attached with a throat seizing, where the two parts of the shroud cross each other. And of course he illustrates this in the book. He says that it should be left-handed if the shroud is cable-laid. It should be right-handed if it is hawser-laid. And furthermore, he says, in the case of cable-laid, the ends of the shrouds will lie aft, that is to say, towards the stern on the larboard side, and forwards on the starboard side. You can see this here on the mizzen shrouds of the Boreas. The mizzen shroud, the tail end of the shroud is to starboard, it's towards the bow, while on the other side, it is towards the stern on the port side. And this is something that very, very frequently is gotten wrong. The next thing that, and final thing that I would like to talk about today is something that I have started seeing in videos, in pictures, and even on some models lately, in the last maybe 2-3 years. It is quite possible that simply I have not seen it earlier than this, and people have done it. I don't know where this idea has come up with, and namely that the way you belay the lanyard that connects the two dead eyes is by wrapping it around the middle part of the shroud. I think that this is coming from modern yachting. Now that we are back to the traditional non-steel cable rigging of boats, I see it again and again. When you do it through thimbles, yes, maybe you can do it this way. But when it is a proper deadeye with 3 holes, you actually belay the lanyard on the shroud above the deadeye, not around the wrappings. You cannot tighten it around the wrappings properly. Also, don't forget that throughout the historical period that we're dealing with, prior to the introduction of steel cables for shrouds, while natural fiber was used, depending on the climate condition, this was constant struggle to keep the rigging taut. Depending on the changing conditions, the rain, the humidity, the sunlight, the heat, the cables will stretch or will tauten, shorten. So the bosun and his crew, assuming they knew their business, would be constantly easing on the lanyards or, au contraire, tightening on them to prevent the mast from being sprung on the one hand side or going by the board because the rigging is too loose. If you tighten these lines by wrapping them around the lanyards as they go between the holes of the two dead eyes, you cannot easily and comfortably release them regularly. And you cannot get proper tightening. Don't believe me, don't listen to me if you don't want to. Look at what David Steele is showing. David Steele has long been established as primary source, informative, and contemporary source of this information. So, look at it. Where is the tail end, the running end of the lanyard going? Is it being wrapped around this? No, of course not. It is going right above them. And it will be belayed on the shrouds because this is how it is easier to do it. It is quite possible it will be seized somewhere on the way before you release it from the block and tackle that is used to tighten this, and then wrap it up. Incidentally, on the so-called modern replica ships, this is how it is done also, more often than not. Before I finish this video, there is one more thing, one last. This is what, the second last that I'm listing? Let's hope that we do not reach to the third last thing for this video. So, what I would like to show is how you start and how you run the lanyard. Here is a view from inside the ship pointing outwards. So, what we see from the illustration and what is described by Lever is that you begin, the stopper knot goes into the opposite end of the dead eye from where the running end of the shroud is. This is important to remember. It is one of the things that I frequently see done wrong. Again, do yourself a favor, get Darcy Lever. David Steele's books, the new editions, are wonderful too also. They're very valuable, they're easily foundable. However, the Cambridge edition, being a Cambridge edition, is much more expensive than the Dover edition. Also, the illustrations are at a much smaller scale. And essentially the information between Steele has more tables and more detailed information, of course, but for the purposes of most model builders, Darcy Lever is probably going to be enough. And if you do not believe me, think of some of the professional riggers who deal with such. For example, the famous rigger of traditional vessels, Courtney Anderson, he uses Darcy Lever and goes to primary sources. And yes, probably most of you are aware of the vessels on which he has worked. Pretty much most of the ones that are accurately rigged are rigged by him or some others, but he also is known for his work on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. If you ever have a chance to listen to one of his lectures, go. It's well worth it. We were fortunate enough for him to come visit at Avery Point last year and were able to see and hear his lectures in person. With this, I wish you most wonderful rest of the day, and till next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Warm-hearted thank you to the sponsors. Goodbye.